Welcome to Fox Soul's Black Report, your source for Black news, Black views, and Black opinions. Today is Wednesday, March 23rd. I'm Seth Lemon.
I'm Mimi Brown.
I'm Romeo.
I'm Demi Lobo, and on today's report, confirmation hearings for the first Black woman ever nominated to the U.S. Supreme Court continue today. What to expect as the process begins to wrap. Meanwhile, Stacey Abrams files a lawsuit over the governor's race in Georgia. Why she says the rules are giving the current governor a leg up. Then First President Barack Obama, then two more high-profile cases have popped up, reminding us that the pandemic is far from over as officials anticipate another surge.
Plus, Jamaicans are demanding an apology and reparation for slavery while they are protesting a visit by British royals. And Washington, D.C. is suing Grubhub, how prosecutors say the food delivery service went as far as creating fake restaurants to deceive customers.
We have all that and much more. This is our voice and our truth, so let's get it.
Welcome in, everyone. Today is the third day of hearings, the denouement, if you will, to confirm Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson to the U.S. Supreme Court. And after some grandstanding by Republicans yesterday proved Judge Jackson to be unflappable, day three kicked off today with more partisan bickering over how the hearings are run.
Committee Chairman Dick Durbin is defending his handling of the hearings, saying some of the questions had to do less with Judge Jackson's record and more to do with politics. Joining us now on Fox Soul's Black Report is Malik Abdul. He's a GOP strategist and political analyst in Washington, D.C. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So let's jump right in. Most court analysis say Judge Jackson fared well, even with the aggressive questionings that we saw from senators like Ted Cruz. Cruz asked about the judge. She asked the judge about Georgetown Day School, a private school where she sits on the board. He also asked her about a book written by Ibrahim Kendi called Anti-Racist Baby. Here's a bit of that exchange.
With kids that babies are racist.
I do not believe that any child should be made to feel as though they are racist or though they are not valued or though they are less than, that they are victims, that they are oppressors. I don't believe in any of that. But what I will say is that when you asked me whether or not this was taught in schools, critical race theory, my understanding is that critical race theory as an academic theory is taught in law schools. And to the extent that you were asking the question, I understood you to be addressing public schools. Georgetown Day School, just like the religious school that Justice Barrett was on the board of, is a private school.
So Malik, you're a conservative. Is the questioning of the judge about issues that are not relevant to her confirmation, is that wise?
Yeah, so I think this actually is a very good question. And because we try to really center our news around Black people, I think it's important that we realize that what we're seeing now in the confirmation hearings, this is the standard for confirmation hearings. It's very unfortunate, but if you go back to the Kavanaugh and Barrett hearings, what you saw is that Democrats were doing many of the same things and weren't questioning her actual judicial philosophy in the sense of, the cases that she actually brought before, or in the same case with Kavanaugh. It is more of the political theater. So we saw that sort of political theater when Donald Trump was in office. And I 100% agree with others who now say that Republicans are engaged in a lot of political theater. There are some substantive questions about what she has done in her judicial philosophy that jurists typically shy away from, but there were some substantive questions happening. But understand, we have not just a midterm cycle coming up. We have people who are interested in running for president of the United States. And much like it happened when Trump was in office, remember, it was then Senator Booker and Senator Harris who made a lot of waves. So yes, a lot of this stuff is political theater, and some of the questions themselves will be inappropriate and not solely as far as the decisions that she's actually made as a judge.
So, yes, we remember Booker and Harris when they were in their Senate hearings, although one might argue that their line of questioning was a little bit more focused and less theater than especially this guy who is assumed to have aspirations to run for president, Senator Josh Hawley from Missouri. He tried to make Judge Jackson seem like she was too soft on pedophiles because of her sentencing in the case. Listen to what he said.
Help me understand that. What word would you use if it's not heinous or egregious? How would you describe it?
Thank you, Senator, for letting me address the concern that you've put forward based on the record that you've reviewed. As a judge who is a mom and has been tasked with the responsibility of actually reviewing the evidence that you would not describe in polite company, the evidence that you are pointing to, discussing, addressing in this context is evidence that I have seen in my role as a judge.
So, Malik, he's trying to make Judge Jackson look like she's a soft on crime black revolutionary who just wants to free all criminals. What's the goal here?
Well, it's exactly what you said. This is stuff to actually appeal to the base. And, you know, there probably won't be very many Democrats or people on the left who think that anything that any Republican asks was a fair question. Of course, some of these questions are going to be unfair. And that's why I think it's important for us to understand that, unfortunately, this is how politics works. A lot of political theater is involved in this. I thought that Jackson comported herself very well in a way very similar to almost every single nominee who has come before the Senate Judiciary Committee. I think all of them, by the time it doesn't matter which side of the aisle you're on, by the time you get to that seat where Jackson is now, you have a record of legalese that people actually refer to. So I wish that we were in a different climate where it could just be strictly on the record itself and no type of personal or ad hominem attacks. But that is not something that happens not only in Supreme Court confirmation hearings, it doesn't even happen for cabinet appointments. So I think the American people, hopefully, if 2024 or in the event there's another president in 2024, maybe a Republican president, that Democrats and the people on the left remember the problems or the issues that they had with how Republicans are conducting themselves, and remember that in 2024. But what I will say is that they have been much more respectful of Jackson than Democrats were with both Amy Coney Barrett and Justice Kavanaugh, who was literally called a serial rapist from the dais.
You keep using the term political theater, so we do know unless something changes, the chances are Judge Jackson will most likely be confirmed. We expect that vote to fall along party lines, and many of these same Republicans voted just last year to confirm her to the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. So why the change of heart now? Why this different line of questioning that we're seeing now?
Because again, I'm glad you keep coming back to this, because it's important that we understand Democrats are not there to really question her. As you see, what's happening now is that Democrats are there to actually explain what her decisions are, or to cater to whatever it is that the left wants. When Republicans were in office, they didn't ask tough questions of Kavanaugh or Barrett or Gorsuch. They were there to essentially rubber stamp those confirmations. Democrats are doing the very same thing now. I challenge anyone to actually ask what is a very controversial or any sort of question that Democrats have asked of Jackson, and there probably isn't any, because that is not what the parties themselves do. Again, I wish it were different, but unfortunately, we're operating in a very politically toxic climate, and we cannot, we shouldn't expect, even though it would be nice, we shouldn't expect Republicans to act any different than how Democrats act. And the political pendulum is going to continue to swing. But I thought that she's done a great job comporting herself. And, yes, she will there is no likelihood that she will not ascend to the high court. I think that she should be on the high court, but the political theater, this is just what our politics is. And I think that we need to be more responsible in calling it out on both sides of the aisle and not just be us in media who aligns ourselves with everything that the Democratic Party does and assume that because it's the left, then that must be right. I think we all need to be responsible.
So as a black man, how do you feel about these dog whistles we're hearing as some of this line of questioning, even Chuck Schumer said, seems to have veered off to be a little bit inappropriate and unhinged?
Well, I don't think that I push back a bit on the notion that these are dog whistles. I don't think they're dog whistles. And I challenge anyone to go back and look at how Democrats conducted the Justice Barrett interview and say that
you don't think that it's a dog whistle when they're calling her soft on crime, although she's more experienced and has been before judges and sat on the sentencing commission and knows what judges are supposed to consider. You don't think that white Republicans asking that are dog whistling about her skin color and who she might favor?
There are only two black people in the whole United States Senate. So obviously most of the people who will be questioning in any circumstance.
But the tenor of the questions doesn't matter, right?
No, I don't think that these are dog whistles at all. And I'm pretty certain that Republicans would have the same position on any nominee that Joe Biden put forth. It doesn't matter if it's Ketanji Brown versus anybody else.
I think that you're right there, that no matter who he selected, we would have seen this line of questioning from so many people who aspire to be reelected or to run for president. Malika Abdul, thank you for joining us on Fox Soul's Black Report. I appreciate you coming on today.
Thanks for having me.
A spokesperson for Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas says the longest-serving member on the bench does not have COVID-19. Thomas has missed his oral argument this week after being hospitalized with flu-like symptoms on Friday. A court spokesperson says the 73-year-old is feeling better. He's been treated with IV antibiotics and is expected to be discharged within a day or two. Reps say all of the justices are fully vaccinated and boosted, and that Thomas is participating in the discussion of cases through briefs, transcripts, and audio recordings of the arguments.
President Biden is expected to hit Russia with more punishing sanctions in the next few days. Biden left for Brussels this morning, on his way to meet with NATO and European leaders to discuss the war in Ukraine. Now, a national security advisor said he would join allies in imposing further sanctions and coordinate the next phase of military assistance to Ukraine. This time, the sanctions will hit hundreds of members of Russia's lower house of parliament. Biden is expected to press Western leaders for even more aggressive economic actions as the NATO alliance has pushed its limits. Europe is dependent on Russian energy and is at the doorstep of an attack from Moscow. Meanwhile, the president is warning Russia may use chemical warfare against Ukrainian troops. Minister Biden said he believes it is a real threat and will warn his European counterparts during his trip.
It's the 12th anniversary of the Affordable Care Act, more commonly known as Obamacare, but year 13 could see some very major changes. Lawmakers in Washington and across state legislatures, they could make some changes to it that kick some people off the program and add some others. One of those improvements includes $0 premiums for low-income Americans who make $19,000 a year or less. The premium discount also helps a family of four who lives on $39,000 or less. Meanwhile, financial aid to pay for health care could go away for millions of others. Money from the American Rescue Plan, which Democrats passed last year, could get cut off by the end of this year. And this is unless Congress makes more financial help available. If you need more information, you can go to healthcare.org to learn more.
And Senator Majority Chuck Schumer is working on a plan to pay for a new coronavirus relief fund. The Democratic senator says he is working with Senator Mitt Romney and other Republicans to find a way to expense it. The original funding was dropped from a massive government spending bill that passed earlier this month. The $15 billion funding bill was stripped out of a larger legislation by some House Democrats in states that would have changed the way the funding was spent. Schumer says the bipartisan effort is moving forward in good faith. A separate bipartisan effort to lower insulin costs for patients could pass the Senate very soon.
A Capitol rioter got some good and bad news from a federal judge yesterday. U.S. District Judge Trevor McFadden found Coy Griffin guilty of one count of entering restricted area on January the 6th, but he wasn't found guilty of a second count of disorderly conduct. The judge presided over a single day of testimony after Griffin waived his right to a jury trial. Griffin is the founder of Cowboys for Trump. He was recently charged with a misdemeanor campaign finance case for failing to register Cowboys for Trump as a political committee.
Close to $2 billion have been saved by student loan borrowers under a repayment freeze that started during the pandemic. You know, you haven't had to make any payments, but researchers believe those borrowers will struggle to make repayments once the freeze is lifted. Researchers from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York released new findings Tuesday, finding that an estimated $195 billion has been saved by 37 million students since the repayment freeze began in March 2020. The freeze only applies, though, to those who have direct federal student loans, not private loans.
Meanwhile, the head of the NAACP and the Senate Majority Leader are teaming up to urge the president to cancel student debt altogether. They say the racial wealth gap will persist as long as student debt continues to grow. Derek Johnson and Chuck Schumer penned their opinion in an op-ed for BET.com. The piece points to how black borrowers are most likely to need loans than white. On average, they start off owing $25,000 more debt than white graduates. And the median white borrower will owe just 6% of their debt after 20 years, while black borrowers will still owe 95% of theirs. The two call the disparity unacceptable, un-American, and unsustainable.
While officials in some states are making it illegal to teach about racial justice, there are others that are protecting teachers' rights to teach a fuller view of American history. Now, 41 states have introduced bills to restrict critical race theory or discussion of race in the classroom, but 17 states have expanded education about racism or bias studies. Now, the school districts are mandating curriculums that discuss the contribution Black and other non-white people have made to American history.
Stacey Abrams is filing a lawsuit so her campaign for governor can start fundraising. Right now, her campaign can't raise money because the state has not officially approved Abrams as the Democratic nominee for governor. That's even though Abrams has no opponents running against her. Abrams says her GOP opponent, Brian Kemp, has already raised $2.5 million for his reelection. She points to the legislation Kemp signed, giving himself exclusive access to a special fundraising committee. Now Abrams wants to take advantage of a new state law that allows certain groups to accept unlimited contributions. Georgia gubernatorial primary is set for late May. So if we think about this and what's going on, we know she has a lot of power. We know that for a fact. And the reason why we saw what happened in election 2020, to me, this is another slap in the face of just trying to slow up the campaign, slow up what's going on. And we do know those who raise the most money and use the most money for campaigns usually end up winning that race, too.
Yeah, this is yet again an instance where we're seeing Stacey Abrams talking about Brian Kemp's efforts. Last time, removing people from the voter rolls, as she alleged was happening, and that did not help. And moving on, now we're seeing this special law giving him an extra boost, according to her. We'll see what the courts have to say.
Yeah.
An African-American business owner in Alabama is filing a federal lawsuit 2 years after he was assaulted by a cop in his own liquor store. The suit alleges that Officer Justin Rippin used excessive force against store owner Kevin Penn. Now, Penn's attorneys say their client called cops after stopping a shoplifter from stealing. When officers arrived, they say they saw Penn's gun on the store counter. An officer yelled at Penn about the gun as they approached him with their weapons drawn. And the video shows Penn telling the cop he was going to file a complaint. That's when Penn was punched in the face and charged with obstructing government operations.
A South Carolina sheriff is defending an officer who shot a man who was having a mental health breakdown. This is video of the incident. The family of 34-year-old Irvin Charlie called deputies after he became violent with relatives. When deputies came, they told him to drop the knife. The object in his hand turned out to be a wooden stake. Now, Charlie continues to approach the officer. His partner fires a taser, but that does not work. So the other officer, he continues to give Charlie orders to stop. When he keeps moving forward, Charlie is shot dead. Sheriff Leon Lott says that residents can't expect deputies to sacrifice their lives in dangerous situations like these. Lott also refuses to release the entire body camera footage, saying that everyone does not need to see it. Critics say Charlie was having a mental health crisis and deputies were wrong to shoot him. A judge will now decide whether to charge the officers with a crime.